स्वाध्याय टीवी। डॉक्टर बाबा साहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी।
Namaskar. Greetings from Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar Open University. Dear learners, I, Professor Ami Upadhyay, welcome you all in the learning session under the subject Communication Skills. Dear learners, today we are going to discuss about types of communication. Why to know the types of communication? Yes, because when one knows about the various types of communication, when are they used, how do they differ, they will be able to understand it in a better way, the do's and don'ts related to communication. So, we will discuss today various types of communication. Today, we are going to see all the types, witness them, observe them with the help of slides also. Shall we have a glance over the slide? Here we can see there are so many types of communication: verbal, non-verbal, formal, informal, oral, written, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, organizational and many more. We may not be able to remember them all at a time. So, what we are going to do today? We are going to discuss them category wise, because all of them differ as they fall into or they belong to various categories of types of communication. Let us see the first type category. Communication which is based on use of words, verbal communication and non-verbal communication. The image itself says, and verbal communication, a person is speaking, shouting, we do not know, yeah, but using words, the words come through the mouth. So, the first type which is verbal communication which uses words, communication which uses words to be communicated, to share some thought, idea, emotion or feeling. The second is non-verbal communication. Oh, happy, unhappy, surprised, shocked, expressions are there, no words, but then also the emotion, feeling seems to be communicated. Yes, the second type is non-verbal communication. Communication based on use of the words. When we talk about this first category of communication, type of communication, verbal and non-verbal communication. I repeat, verbal communication which uses words as a medium, sign, symbol, and non-verbal communication which does not use word as a sign, symbol or tool to communicate. Now, if we move further, we can see in types of verbal communication, again there are two types of communication: oral communication and written communication. Now, verbal communication means words are used, but in oral communication words are spoken, uttered, they come through the mouth. And written communication where the words are there, but they are not spoken, they are not uttered, they are in written form. Let us have a glance over the forms of oral communication. Face to face conversation, telephone conversations, meetings, seminars, conferences, dictation, instructions. Dear Mindville, it is about the oral instructions, not about the written instructions. Presentations, group discussions, interviews, video conferences and voice conferences. These are the forms of oral communication. Now, if we move to the forms of written communication. Dear students, we are going to discuss about the advantages and disadvantages of oral written communication later on. At present, we are focusing more on the types of communication. Under that, verbal, non-verbal communication, under verbal communication, oral communication and written communication, and now here we have forms of written communication: memos, letters, emails, faxes, notices, circulars, newsletters, reports, proposals, research papers, bulletins, brochures, manuals and in-house journals. These are the forms of written communication. Now, we move to the next type. Yes. Now, communication based on place, purpose and content. They are general communication and professional communication. My dear students, it is very important to understand these types of communication: general communication and technical communication. You might be wondering how this is based on place, purpose and maybe content. Yes, let me clarify that first. Place means generally communication that takes place at a professional place, organization. Generally, the communication tend to be and expected to be professional or technical communication. Communication generally which takes place at family, home, get together, maybe in the fields, parks, theaters. Those communications are generally very comfortable general kind of communication. So, the place decides. Second, the purpose decides. For example, communication at home. I communicate to my daughter, my mother, my father or maybe brother, sister, sibling. There the communication purpose is maybe sharing emotions, feelings, support, all those things. In that case, generally the purpose is general, very informal and familiar. At that time, communication that takes place is generally general communication. When matter comes to a professional place, a memo is to be given, a task to be finished within the time limit, a letter has to be sent, the proposal is to be accepted. So, these are the very professional purposes, task based, work based communications. Now, these communications are technical, professional in their nature, very basic nature. So, the purpose is professional. So, the communication is very professional and technical. It is not general. Even the relationship also. Relationship between siblings, brother, sister, parent, child, very close friends, those relationships are general relationship. They are not professional relationship. So, in such relationship, when communication takes place, it is general communication. But relationship between maybe a manager, general manager and maybe marketing manager and marketing supervisor, now those relationships are very professional. Relationship between maybe a teacher and a professor and the principal, professional relationship. So, in such relationship, generally whenever communication takes place, it is expected to be and tend to be technical, professional communication. Obviously, the content and topic also of the communication also decides. Mode of communication also decides whether the communication is general communication or technical or professional communication. For example, generally when I want to communicate to my friend or maybe to brother, sister, I would prefer to have a word face to face or maybe a telephonic communication. I may not go for mail, I may not go for writing something with my signature and everything. So, generally general communication is very informal in its pattern, in its style, and technical or professional communication is very technical, to the point, and mostly it is written. General communication is very general, informal in style and approach also, while professional communication is very formal in style and approach. In general communication, we observe that there is not a set pattern of communication, that it has to be written like this only, it has to follow this pattern only. While when it comes to professional communication, yes, a set pattern has to be used, followed. The reason is that most of the time the technical or professional communication requires further reporting, further references, proofs, etc. And there again the matter related to oral or written comes. As general communication is more oral, written communication is with more professional side. General communication is not always for a specific audience. I generally communicate. When you communicate generally, you are not so conscious about who listens me, I have to target this audience, I have to understand their mindset. Those strategies, those plannings are generally not with the general communication. But when it comes to professional communication, yes, it is for the specific targeted audience. And so, the set pattern, planning, strategy, all these things play very vital role. General communication does not involve the use of very technical vocabulary, jargons, graphics, etc. While when it comes to professional communication or technical communication, the professional business jargons, graphs, charts, etc. meticulously used. Not only used, one has to be very careful about all the information, especially the statistical information provided in that. So, my dear students, I hope you are clear that in types of communication, the category that we discuss is based on formality. The category that we discuss, that is where the communication takes place. So, it is general and professional or technical. Now, we move to the next category types of communication. Now, organizational communication. In organizational communication, observe, my dear students, that mainly there are two types, internal and external. Internal communication, where the communication takes place within the organization. One person belonging to A organization communicates to belonging to the same A organization. Here A means, I say that capital A, like X, Y, Z or ABC. A person from maybe a sales department of X company communicates to the marketing department person from the same X company. That is internal communication. External communication means communication that takes place with the government officials, clients, customers, or maybe with the other agencies where they are dealing, the business or the work culture urges to communicate. Now, again in internal communication, we have formal and informal communications. Now, again formal and informal communication, these two types of communications, they are based on formality level of communication. Internal communication based on formality, there we find two types, formal communication and informal communication. Formal communication follows the official hierarchy and is required to do one's job. Now, generally we observe that every organization will have their particular hierarchy. Now, that starting from the highest authority, then there would be various layers, levels, cadres of maybe officers, people working, when communication that takes place at the various levels of the hierarchy, it is known as formal communication. And generally in formal communication, the soul or the main chief purpose of the communication used to be the task has to be done to reach to the objective or goal. And generally these objectives or goals are more professional organizational goals. Now, generally in such kind of information, in communication we find a set of informations of various kinds, such as policy or procedural changes, orders, instructions, or maybe sometimes very confidential reports, etc. These are very professional, official kind of documents, procedures. Most of the time they are written communication. These are the examples of formal communication. And mind well, my students, mind well. Remember that these formal communication contents, they flow through very formal channels. These communications are classified as formal communications. Now, generally the communication which does not talk about professional, official things, maybe the policies, procedures, orders, instructions, memos, all these things, they are informal communication. Now, again we will move further with organizational formal communication flow. Let us see that. Now, flow of internal formal communication. Now, you see we have studied internal, we studied formal, and now under internal flow of communication, we would focus more on formal communication. Now, under formal communication, we can see the two categories, vertical and horizontal. I know you saw the two. The third is diagonal communication. Now, formal communication, vertical, horizontal and diagonal. Vertical communication, where you can see this is vertical communication. Vertical, here the various levels of hierarchy, the highest cadre, the highest officer, then the second cadre of the officers, then the third cadre of the officers. So, this is vertical. This is vertical. Vertical means highest authority communicating to the lower cadre person, or maybe the lower cadre person communicating to the higher authority. So, this is vertical. Now, in vertical you can see when I say the highest cadre communicating to the lower. So, this is downward, and when maybe a student communicating to the principal, a professor communicating to the vice chancellor, a supervisor communicating to the general manager, upward. So, in vertical what did we observe? In vertical we have two. Vertical communication, we have upward communication and we have downward communication. Before we discuss about the horizontal and diagonal, we will clarify the upward and downward communication. Upward communication is very important and very essential, and today in 21st century, whenever the organizations, they want to succeed, they want to prove themselves, they want to be on the top, they encourage upward communication a lot. Generally in downward communication, what happens that the superior people, people at the higher authority, they send the orders, and that at lower level people follow them. In upward communication, at lower level people, they send not only the reports, they do not simply report, sometimes they send their very constructive suggestions also. this should be done, this should not be done, we feel like this, we do not feel like this. So, they send their feedback, good, bad, fine, excellent, worth being done, not worth being done, everything to the highest level or the higher level. Upward communication is very important. Why? Because that keeps managers or maybe other people at a higher level aware about what exactly is happening in the organization. Listen, my dear students, my dear learners, at top level, when anybody wants to succeed, when anybody is very committed to have very positive, very good, very constructive, very forwarding environment in the organization, the higher level person would invite maximum upward communication. In many organizations, you will observe there will be suggestion box, feedback box. Why? In suggestion box and feedback box, I am a worker at maybe at XYZ organization. I feel good about something, I feel bad about something. I may not have guts, courage, or there may not be that kind of environment where I can go and stand in front of the authority and tell this is good, this is bad, this should be done, this should not be done. What can I do? I have an option that I write something, I fold it and I put it into the suggestion box or feedbacks. This is upward communication. Why this is so useful? The authorities come to know that in which direction the culture of the organization is moving. And certain successful organizations, they have relied a lot on this upward communication, because such upward communication helps the higher authority people a lot in decision making. The complete picture of the feeling, emotions, of the people, because you see the main asset of any organization is people, not the infrastructure, not the machines, not ICT, nothing else, it is people. So, what do they share, what do they want to tell? That would help a lot to the organizational culture to move in the right direction. With lesser hierarchical levels, managers are able to create a climate of trust and respect and implement participative decision making or empowerment. In upward communication, it is not the authority who takes decision. The decisions are unanimous decision. Everybody feels that okay, I contributed in this decision making. At the end of the day, what happens? That people at a lower level, they feel empowered. They have more strength. Now, the strength is there to contribute in a better way in the organization. Thus, upward communication is very important. My dear students, in vertical communication, we were discussing about the various flows of communication, where there was vertical communication, horizontal communication and diagonal or crosswise communication. In vertical communication, we discussed about upward communication. Yes. The next is downward communication. Downward communication, when managers, directors or people at higher authority, they communicate to the people at lower cadre. What do they do generally? They inform, instruct, advise, request, orders, etc. They do it, that is fine. Most of the time we have observed that generally the organizations have very upward is comparatively less, more of a downward communication is there, generally in the conventional set of organizations. Here the communication flows in a downward pattern. Such communication increases awareness about the organization. When we discuss about the various types of management, we have observed that sometimes the higher authority or maybe the highest authority people, they have wonderful vision. They have a very concrete dream of the organizations, how in which direction it's supposed to move, what are the objectives, goals of that organization, how all of us can can work together and achieve our goals. But how people at the lower level will come to know? They would not be able to support or cooperate till the time they themselves are not communicated about this. So, most of the time what organization stands for, what are the vision, mission, objectives, purpose, dreams of organizations, they come down through downward communication. Downward communication take place in any of the forms, for example, memos, notices, face to face interactions or telephone conversation, any of them. My dear students, I hope now you are clear about from the flow of communication, vertical communication, in vertical communication, upward communication and downward communication. The next is horizontal communication or maybe lateral communication. Now, horizontal communication or maybe lateral communication. In this what happens that there is a hierarchy in generally cadre 1, 2, 3, 4 for example. Now, people from cadre 2 communicating to the other people from the same cadre, that is lateral or horizontal. Communication between people or persons belonging to the same level or cadre of hierarchy, that is known as lateral or horizontal communication. They are generally at equivalent designation, post or something. Why this is so important? It is important because sometimes what happens that at the same level people should know a set of informations about the organizations and its working pattern. Now, due to one or the other reason, I as a part of this cadre doesn't know what is happening in the organization or what policy are we planning to follow. I do not know. If I communicate to the person belonging to same cadre and there I come to know, okay, are we planning for this procedure, okay, we are moving with this policy, okay. So, this is the final decision of the authority. So, this okay means, oh, I understand. When I understand better, I will be able to perform better. So, if certain set of information might be very important has been missed out formally in either downward or upward communication, mostly in the downward communication, the lateral or horizontal communication supplements it, helps it, and in that way the people in the same organization are better to they are able to work in a better way with better coordination. Something very important in this part is that what happens that most of the time it's a tragedy of the organization or maybe very pathetic about any organization that the organization has various departments. Now, those departments are working for the organization. Now, maybe the marketing department, sales department, purchase department, production department, do they have their very private personal objectives, goals? No, they may have their departmental goals, but those departmental goals finally lead them to the organizational goals. So, many a times the failure of the organization is there because the department work, all the various departments, they work as simple departments, not as a part of the whole organization. Like they are the jigsaw puzzle, like the whole organization is the jigsaw puzzle. So, the parts might be different, but when we want to have the whole picture of it, all of them have to be placed at a proper place and then the complete picture comes out. So, lateral or horizontal communication is important to bridge this gap amongst all the departments. Even in the universities also, various schools are there, various departments are there, maybe in the admission department, examination department, school of computer science, school of this, or maybe department of this department. Now, when we talk about the university, it is a whole. It cannot work in fragments of departments. When there is more lateral or horizontal communication, the departments are connected so well that they come out as a whole. The third is diagonal communication, diagonal or crosswise. This is non-verbal, which supports my verbal. When I say vertical, vertical word, this is vertical. When I say horizontal or lateral, word, verbal and non-verbal. Now, I say diagonal or maybe crosswise communication that takes place from the cross department, person belonging to this cadre. You can just visualize. For example, this is vertical, okay, vertical. So, cadre 1, cadre 2, cadre 3 maybe. Now, this is department. Can you visualize this? So, here 4 departments are there, 4 departments, and we can have 2 cadres. So, this is a cadre 1 and this is cadre 2. So, this is 1 department, 2 department, 3 department, 4 department. Now, what happens? That a person belonging to this cadre means the higher level of authority belonging to this department communicates to the lower level of authority subordinate, maybe from belonging to the comparatively low cadre of the authority. Now, the department also differs and cadre also differs. So, here is a cross communication, diagonal communication. Dear students, just have a glance over the slide. Here you can see the CEO is there, marketing manager and sales manager. The cadre has been deferred, CEO is a higher authority. After that comes marketing manager and sales manager. Now, you see they are from the same cadre, they are from the same level of authority. Below that we may have marketing supervisor, demand supervisor, sales supervisor, purchase supervisor, etc. Now, my dear students, look there. When CEO communicates to marketing manager or maybe a sales manager, it is which type of communication? Yes, it is downward communication. Okay. When marketing manager communicates to the CEO, it is upward communication. When marketing manager communicates to the sales manager or maybe a sales manager communicates to the marketing manager, it is lateral or horizontal communication. When a marketing manager, instead of communicating to marketing supervisor, communicates to the sales supervisor, dear students, it is diagonal or cross level communication. I hope the flow of communication is comparatively clear to you, vertical, horizontal and diagonal. Now, we move to the next set of types of communication. Have a glance. Now, you see formal communication network models. We discussed about formal and informal communication. Now, in formal communication network models, we have chain network, Y network, wheel network, circle network and all channel network. Now, in chain network, what happens? That it is like a chain, understand? Chain. So, it is A to B, B to C, C to D, it becomes a chain. How? A tells to B, B says it to C, C says it to D. In chain format, this formal communication moves further. Is it clear? For example, marketing manager says something to the sales manager says something to the production manager, So, this is formal communication and with the formal content. See the second type. The second type is Y network. Now, in Y network what happens? That the person maybe at higher authority feels that communication should move further up to certain level in single strand, then it should move further in two strands. For example, the CEO of the company communicates something to the marketing manager, and then the CEO of the company who communicates to the marketing manager says, instructs or orders marketing manager to communicate the same to the production supervisor also and sales supervisor also. So, 1, 2 and 3. Let us make it yet clearer. Y shape 1, 2 and 3. CEO communicates to maybe a marketing manager and orders to communicate to the sales supervisor and production supervisor. So, it is a Y. Okay. So, single chain network, second Y chain network, see the third one. Wheel network. Now, wheel, do you visualize the wheel? Okay. The center and then there are the spokes. Okay. Generally what happens? The authority who urges to communicate, who is there to communicate something, is there in the center, and people who are to be communicated are at the periphery. From center, the information moves to the periphery. It is wheel network. Wheel network. Listen, it is not that at the periphery communication does not take place, but in wheel network generally at the periphery the communication is very less. The focus is at the center and from center the communication moves to the periphery. So, it is a wheel network. After wheel network, let us have the second. The next is circle network. In circle, this is circle. In circle network what happens? The communication keeps on moving at the periphery. A to B, maybe A to D, A, B, C, D, E, F, here the people are there, and in circle the information moves. In circle it is not always that the information moves like this only or like this only. It may vary. It may vary in its direction. Okay. So, that is circle. Single chain, then Y, then wheel, then circle. These are the formal network chains. Keep in mind, these are the formal communication network chains. And the last one is all channel network. Sometimes, when in formal communication also the highest authority feels that this communication should move very fast, very rapidly to the people, they let it flow from all the chains at a time, all the network channels at a time. So, the 5 channels or chains of communication, that too formal communication. Okay, dear students, now I hope you are clear about formal communication network models. After formal communication network models, we move to the informal communication network models. We know it very well that what is formal communication and what is informal communication. Dear students, we have observed that in many organizations, many a times information flows faster through informal communication, and smart managers, smart people, smart authorities, they utilize this informal communication channels also very beautifully, wonderfully with all their smartness. Yes, strategy, management, all those things stand for that. So, let us have a glance over the informal communication network models. In informal communication network models, we have 4: single strand, gossip, probability and cluster. Single strand network. Again in single strand network, what happens? Informal is generally, obviously it is not pre-planned all the time, or it is not always meant for this audience only. Very informally it moves this side or that side. But single strand means A informally communicates something to B, B communicates to C, C to D. It may come back in the same direction, may come back in the same way. So, it is single strand. Next is gossip. Gossip, people are so fond of it, gossip, do not tell it to anybody. When communication starts generally, do not tell it to anybody, be sure that it is doomed to be communicated at so many places. So, because generally professional places also have lot many gossip mongers, they enjoy that, and when somebody says I am sharing this with you only, not with anybody else, rest assured that has been communicated to so many people in the same way. So, that is gossip. As gossip it moves further. The third is probability. Now, in probability channel, what happens? That it depends on the probability whether it would happen or not. For example, that a person is moving in the corridor, very furious about something, very disturbed about something, maybe tensed about something, and with that tensed that tense mood or that tensed maybe the being of mind is moving out of the office, and in the corridor suddenly a person comes. Now, the person who is very disturbed or is tensed about something, who has recently some very serious talk on telephone, might have never planned to communicate this grave or serious issue to the person who might have met in the corridor, but probability, and suddenly he or she shares. So, that is informal communication depending on the probability, possible, not possible. So, first is single strand, second is gossip, third is probability, and the fourth is cluster. Cluster means a group. In that case, what happens? That A may share something with B and C, maybe B, C and D. Now, from there A shares with B, C and D or B and C. From there the communication from B, again it moves further in cluster X, Y, Z, here 1, 2, 3. So, I communicate to the cluster informally. Now, from that cluster individuals, they communicate individually to again a group of clusters. So, the communication, informal communication moves further in clusters, in groups. So, that is cluster. I hope, my dear students, that today the various types of communication, the types are clear to you. We discussed about verbal, non-verbal, formal, informal, that is under organization. Now, again in organizational, we had internal, external, formal, informal. From the flow of communication, we had vertical, horizontal or lateral, diagonal. Again in vertical we discussed about upward and downward. We discussed about various chains, channels, models of formal and informal communication networks. We discussed about oral and written communication too. I hope the general idea about the types of communication is clear to you. You have learnt today. Try to identify when you come across various types of communication. The identifying is not enough, is not sufficient. Observing, thinking and implementing the do's and don'ts of them are equally important. Wish you very happy learning. Namaste.
स्वाध्यायः परमं तपः।
स्वाध्याय टीवी